Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem. Hope everyone is doing great. Aggada, in our Shiur of Talmudic tales, we don't always tell a tale. We don't always tell a story. Aggada is not only the storytelling portion of Gemara, of Shas, of Chazal, of Medrash, but it's also the non-halachic. When you refer to Aggada, maybe we'll have a Shiur on this one day. Aggadatas are the non-halachic portions of Shas. So this morning we are going to, or this afternoon, we are going to learn a very short piece of Gemara, and it's very interesting, and it speaks to human nature and to who people are. But I'm going to share two other Gemaras, one a Yerushalmi and one a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, that I promise you will not forget. I promise you will not forget these Gemaras. And along the way, we're going to see a lot of beautiful, beautiful, beautiful ideas. So the Gemara begins on Masecha at the very, very bottom of Daf Kuf Samich Dalid Amud Beis in Maseches Bava Basra. Amar Rav Amram Amar Rav. Okay, Rav Amram says the name of Rav. Shalosh averos ein adam nitzol mehen b'chol yom. There are three averos. There are three sins that a person is never saved from them. The person is never saved from them. What does that mean? It means that a person always does them. It's always there. It's never that it doesn't apply to me. Ein adam nitzol mehen b'chol yom. Now, hopefully the Gemara is wrong, right? But the Gemara is talking about most people. For most people in the world, ein adam nitzol mehen. There are three averos. What are these three averos that are so pervasive, are so ubiquitous that really they affect people every single day? So the first the Gemara says is Shiur Avera, our thoughts of Avera, our thoughts of doing sin, our thoughts of perhaps, and some of them in Farshim do say this, Shiur Avera doesn't mean only that I want to eat a cheeseburger, but it's mostly thoughts, a bit lustful thoughts, immoral thoughts. Second, V'iyun Tefillah. The second Avera that is so pervasive is Iyun Tefillah. Is, how would you explain Iyun Tefillah? We're going to see Rashbam and a Tosfos in a second, but just what is Iyun? It means delving into, looking into davening. So if Shiur Avera is the first one, lustful thoughts, then you have Iyun Tefillah, looking into Tefillah, and then, what a surprise, Lashon Hara. What is something that just does that we always do and the common man does? It is Lashon Hara. So the Gemara then says, no, Lashon Hara sakadaitach, every single day. A person is speaking Lashon Hara every single day, all the time. Ella, no. Gemara answers, Ella Avak Lashon Hara. Avak Lashon Hara. Avak, just by literally, Avak Lashon Hara means the dust of Lashon Hara, but what exactly does that mean? It means it's not mamish Lashon Hara, but it's really like traces of Lashon Hara, something that might not be 100% halachically usher. Might not be like this. Me personally, this person is is dumb. This person is ugly. This person cheated on their spouse, and me posting that and me telling everybody that. But it's something that reeks of Lashon Hara. That is what we describe as Avak Lashon Hara. Okay? Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda then says, Amar Rav. Rov, most people. Now here he's not saying most people every single day. It just seems that, most people do this. Rov begezel. Okay? Rov people begezel, umiyut ba'arayos, v'hakol Lashon Hara. Many people do gezel. Many people steal in some way. Okay? Umiyut ba'arayos. And less people are involved in immorality, but still they're involved in it, right? Still they might mess up at some time. At some point, it might not be the worst part of immorality, but it could be with thoughts, it could be with looking at things on the internet, it could be whatever, right? V'hakol b'lashon hara. But everyone messes up, everyone makes a mistake, everyone has a weak point in the world of lashon hara. So this Gemara is really talking about just the plight of a human being and what we struggle with all the time, or very, 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 very often. Okay, let's just read the Gemara one more time just so we understand. There are three that are so pervasive, they're so ubiquitous that they really affect the person every single day. The first is Shiur Avera, thoughts of Avera, thoughts of sinning. The second is Ian Tefillah, something with relation with something connected or related to Tefillah, not looking into our davening enough. V'lashon hara and lashon hara. Lashon hara sakadaitach. Really, Jews speak lashon hara every single day, right? And this is not talking about all people. Ideally, what he's not ideally, but essentially what he's talking about is from Jews, right? From Jews do hear Avera and Ian Tefillah and lashon hara. So he says lashon hara sakadaitach. Jews speak lashon hara every single day. No. Avak lashon hara. It's these traces, this dust of lashon hara, things that are not bona fide isurim or transgressions of lashon hara, but are things that reek a little bit, that smell a little bit of lashon hara. Amar Rav Yehuda. Then we have Rav Yehuda's opinion, or his just, I guess, his what he notices, right? He wrote, Rov begazo. Many people steal. Many people in some capacity, whether it's taking, too many supplies from the office, or using too much, printing stuff at the office versus at home if they're not allowed to do that. Some aspect of gezel. Umiut ba'arayos. And then less people are transgress the avera of arayos, or some component of the some aspect of arayos. V'akol b'lashon hara. And once again, our real Achilles, a real sore spot is in the world of lashon hara. I don't want to speak so much about lashon hara, no pun intended, but I want to try to understand the Gemara. Maybe we'll devote a different Aggada to lashon hara. But I want to understand the Gemara and a lot of psychology based on this. Ian Tefillah. What does the Rashbam say? What does it mean? What's this Aveira of Ian Tefillah? That we're not learning Be'ian. When you say someone learns Be'ian, right? They learn in depth. So every day, or very, very often, people aren't looking into their Tefillah enough. Is that the Aveira? So the Rashbam says beautifully. Ian Tefillah, Yesh Mefarshim, there are those that explain, Shala'achar She'ispalel, Don Belibo Sheyashlim LaKadosh Baruch Hu Scharo, V'yas HaKadosh Baruch Hu Tzurachav, V'yishma Tfilaso. Right? What he says is basically that the sin is believing 100%, right? That if I daven an authentic tefillah, if I daven a real tefillah, that after I daven, Don Belibo, I have judged in my heart, I feel beyond a shadow of a doubt, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is gonna fulfill my request. He's gonna say yes to whatever I asked for, right? God is gonna do what I asked for him. Right? Because I davened b'kavana, God is going to answer my tefillah. Like really authentic, genuine tefillah cannot fail. If I perform it correctly, if I perform this Shemona Esrei, this Mincha, this Mariv perfectly, right? So then ultimately I am going to be answered. All my tefillah, whatever I ask for is going to be answered. I have a special I have a bitachon. It's almost like I'm guaranteed the answer to my tefillah. So first of all, that's nice and beautiful, and we're going to see the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah that's connected to this a little bit. But Tosfos takes issue with this, and Tosfos believes that this seems to be like a little bit religiously problematic, right? Tefillah. You can't make tefillah into this like ritual that guarantee you're able to like guarantee a manipulation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? If I daven with the most kavanah in the world, all of a sudden God is going to have to bend to my will. No, authentic tefillah really requires like a humility, a healthy dose at least of humility. So Tosfos in the third source says Nira Rebbe the Ian tefillah shehura. What's the Ian tefillah that's bad, right? Ian tefillah has to be something negative because it's a sin that people do every single day. And this speaks to us all the time. She'enam mechuvanim tfilasan, that we don't have tefillah, we don't have kavanah. We daven, we say, you go to Shachris, a 30-minute Shachris, how long do you have kavanah for, right? So lashon hara we speak, and we think about doing averos, and also Ian tefillah, right? According to Tosfos, probably that's what we would have said is the basic sin, is our basic avera of tefillah, is the fact that we don't have proper kavanah, and that makes sense because the Gemara is discussing common sins, right? So he says more simply, you just understand it as a lack of kavana, and that certainly reflects the common problem that that I personally have, that I see in Minyanim, that I think all of Klal Yisrael is is definitely guilty of. I want to ask before we get to this other Gemara. Actually, let's go to this Gemara before we ask a different question. Look at the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. Okay. Actually, we'll do the Yerushalmi first. Sorry, we'll do the Yerushalmi. This Yerushalmi, I learned the first time I heard it. I was in a master's, getting my master's in Azrieli in Yeshiva University, and Rabbi Dr. Pelkovitz, I don't know Rabbi, but Dr. David Pelkovitz, he's a world-renowned psychologist, therapist, and he was teaching us a course in psychology and religion, and he pointed out this Gemara. This is a Yerushalmi in Maseches Brachos, and the Gemara starts with Rabbi Chia. The Gemara is going to quote 4 different Amoraim, 4 different rabbis in the Gemara period. You're going to remember this Gemara. I promise you. I remember this Gemara probably. This is 20 years ago. Amar Rabbi Chia, Ruba Ana Menyome Lo Kavanis. All my days, I never had kavana. Right? All 4 of these Tanaim are battling the kavana game. The same kavana issues that we have, they had as well. Ana min yome lo kavante. All my days, I never had kavana. Elachad zman. Except, you know what? One time I had kavana. Boy mechavne, and I was trying to have kavana, and what happened? I was focusing, and all of a sudden, all of a sudden, I got a thought in my heart, or a feeling in my heart. The Amris, and I said to myself, Man Alil, who is greater? Kume Malka Kadme, is the Melech greater? Or our Kabsa, or is the minister, like the officer in the town, great? Or the Reish Galusa? Meaning, I'm davening, and I'm saying, Rafa'inu Hashem v'nei Rafeh, whatever, I'm davening, Bari Chalinu es Hashana Hazos, Modim Anachnu Lach, I'm davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm trying to have as much kavanah. I never had kavanah before in my life, Rabbi Chia says. Now I'm finally having kavanah, and all of a sudden, what pops into my mind? This whole crazy question. Who's greater? Is the king greater? Is the Reish Galusa greater? Is the Arkavsa greater? And all of a sudden, I start thinking about, and then in my mind, right? This person, and all of a sudden, I wasn't able to have kavanah. Okay, then the Gemara quotes Shmuel, right? Rav and Shmuel. Shmuel Omar, Ana, Manisa, Efroch. You know what I usually end up doing? I start my Shemona Esrei, and you know what I usually end up doing? Manisa Efroch. I start counting young pigeons. I start counting young birds. I guess he's davening outside. They're birds. 1, 2, 3, 4. He starts counting the birds. Rabbi Bun Bar Chia, never heard of Rabbi Bun Bar Chia, but Rabbi Bun Bar Chia, there are some Amoraim actually that are only quoted in the Yerushalmi. They're not quoted in the Bavli. He could be one, or it could just be my complete ignorance. Rabbi Bun Bar Chia says, Amar, Ana Manisa Dimusia. Right? What is he? He doesn't count young pigeons, but similar to Shmuel, he would say during davening, I end up counting like the rows of bricks in the building that I'm in. And that's totally our life. You look and you see, I got a fan in my room. How many lights are there? I count how many rows, how many seats, how many people, how many this, how many that, how many svarim, whatever it is. We lose our concentration so easy. But that's not me. That's Rabbi Chia, that's Shmuel, that's Rabbi Bun Bar Chia, and then Omar Rabbi Masanya. What does he say? He says, Ana mechazik tivo, I'm machzik tova. I'm grateful. L'roshi, I'm grateful to my head. The chadhava mati modim, because whenever modim comes, hukar migarme, my head bows by itself. Meaning I'm totally in the middle of nowhere. I'm totally thinking about something else. Right? There's a joke that people say that why are Jews very organized? We're very organized because 3 times a day we stand up and we just close our eyes and we think about what we have to do that day, what we have to accomplish, right? That's how we spend our Shemona Esrei. So he's saying that even though my head's somewhere else, but I know Modim, all of a sudden, like my body just bows for Modim. I'm not thinking about Modim. I'm not thinking about what I'm grateful for, what I'm appreciative to HaKadosh Baruch Hu about, right? So this is, I found this Makor, this source to be unbelievable. The Amoraim are struggling with Kavana, just like you are struggling with Kavana, just like I struggle with Kavana all the time. Now the Pnei Moshe, in his commentary, must be said, he explains this Gemara as basically saying that no, they were so involved and they were so deep in thought of Torah, whatever they were learning, that they couldn't concentrate on their davening. that's beautiful and that's great, and we shouldn't think negatively at all, chas v'shalom, about the Amoraim. But I don't think that's the point of the Yerushalmi, right? That might be true that they were so engrossed in Talmud Torah. It wasn't that they were thinking about their shopping list, what they had to pick up from Ralph's. Understood. Maybe when they were counting pigeons, it was connected to some sugya that they were learning. But ultimately, why this Gemara is printed is not to say their greatness in Torah. It's to say that they struggle with many issues that we struggle with as well. I want to highlight a different Gemara that I also believe is unbelievable, but it's not the Gemara that's unbelievable. It's Rashi's point and Rav Matisyahu Solomon's understanding of this Gemara, really how he understands the Rashi. The Gemara says in Maseches Rosh Hashanah, Tanya Rabbi Meir Omer. Rabbi Meir would say, Shnayim sha'alu lemita. You have two people, and they fall to the bed. Meaning they're sick in bed, right? They're sick in bed, two people. V'chulyin shaveh. And they have the same exact disease. V'chein, and similarly, Shnayim sha'alu legardom. There are two people that are taken to the gallows, lidon, to be judged, to be killed, really, obviously. V'dinan shaveh. And they're being taken to the gallows for the same exact crime, right? They both murdered 5 people in cold blood, and it was premeditated and everything. And in both cases, in the gallows case, ze yarad, vize lo yarad. One of them is taken off of the gallows, right? The noose is around the neck, he takes it off, right? And this other person, no, he dies. And in the other case, right, ze nitzal, vize lo nitzal, right? One is saved. Meaning one gets better from the sickness. Vize lo nitzal, and the other one doesn't. The other one passes. So the Gemara asks, right? So you have two cases, two identical illnesses, two identical crimes. In one case, one is healed and one dies, and one is saved, right? And one is not. So Gemara asks in the middle of the second line, Mipnei ma ze yarad vize lo yarad, ze nitzal vize lo nitzal. Why is one saved and one not saved? Why is one healed and one not healed? So the Gemara says, Zehit palel v'nane, v'zehit palel v'lo nane. They both davened. One of them davened and he was answered. And one of them davened when the person who died, he davened, but v'lo nane, he wasn't answered. Okay? Gemara has a further question, which we also are going to ask. Why was this person answered? What was the point that this person, A's tefillah was answered and B's tefillah wasn't answered? So what's the difference? I'll listen. The Gemara says, "Zehi spalo tefillah shlema." No. The person who davened a tefillah shlema, the person who davened a complete tefillah, a perfect tefillah, let's say, Nane, he was answered. Vizeh, and the other person, the person who was hung, the person who died, whose illness took their life, Zeh lo ispalel tefillah shlema. No. And that person who didn't daven the perfect, genuine, wonderful, authentic tefillah, they died. Okay, so what does it mean at tefillah shlema? Rashi says one word, niskavein. He had kavana. So a perfect tefillah is a tefillah with kavana, and an imperfect tefillah is a tefillah without kavana. Rav Matisyahu Solomon asks a awesome question on this Gemara. He says, not everyone's going to daven. First doctor comes in, he says, you have 36 hours. They're putting the noose around the person's neck. Not everyone's going to daven. But that's not the facts of this case. The case in this Gemara is both daven. Doctor comes in 36 hours. And person in bed A davens. Person in bed B davens. One has kavana, one doesn't have kavana. The noose is around both their necks. One has kavana, one doesn't have kavana. I understand not davening, but that's not our case. So he asks, you're not going to have kavana? What does that mean? What are you going to be thinking about? If you decide, okay, I'm going to daven for my life now, what in the world? You're going to daven like it's another ashrei? Like it's another Asher Yatzer coming out of the bathroom, you're going to say that bracha? If you decide to daven, I understand you might not decide to daven, but if you decide to daven, you're not going to have kavana. How could that possibly be that you're not going to have kavana? 36 hours, the noose is around your neck. But Ramati Salman says, no. What's kavana here? Kavana doesn't just mean that I'm thinking and I want God. It means that I believe in the efficacy of tefillah. I believe that tefillah makes a difference. That's the kavana that he's talking about in this Gemara. And that's an important kavana that we should have during davening. That I believe. It's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee, right? That was why Tosfos disagreed with the Rashbam. Can't think it's a guarantee. But we have to believe that political pressure could change something, and I could put my faith in the doctor, but ultimately, more than the doctor and more than political pressure, I have to believe that if I open my heart to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, He can do something at the last moment, at the last second, after the cancer is metastasized. I have to believe. I can never give up. And when Rashi says niskaven, he's not thinking that I'm thinking in my mind. I'm just translating the words. No, of course you're going to have kavana. Both people in both beds are going to have kavana. What's the kavana? The kavana is that I believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can change this at any point in time. That is a beautiful, beautiful idea. Let's get back to understanding something else in our Gemara, which I think is crucial. Okay, why does the Gemara need to point this out? Okay, why in the world does the Gemara feel compelled to point out our most commonly found transgressions? Is it a competition? Okay, these are the averos that most of Klal Yisrael does, and these are like tier 2, and these are tier 3, and avodah zarah, that's tier 8 or whatever. I don't know, right? So I think you could basically argue that there are really two reasons why the Gemara feels the need to print this and to tell us. And when you're learning Bava Basra, that you have to go over this Gemara and you have to learn it and think about it and understand it. And I have to know that these are the sins that most of Klal Yisrael does. So on one hand, knowing that something is a real pervasive issue, it's a real pervasive problem, and alerting people to it, right, calls attention to it and allows people, I think, if I know, you can't deal with a problem if you don't know it's a problem. You have to name the problem, right? So therefore, knowing that it's a problem and almost publicizing and getting it out in the open allows people to take precautions and to prepare in terms of confronting the issue, right? If we're going to say that, drug use is not a problem or gambling use or alcoholism in the frum world is not an issue, so we're not going to confront the issue. We're just going to ignore. We're going to sweep it under the carpet, and nothing's ever going to get better. Once we announce that there's an issue, okay, Lashon Hara is an issue. How can we get better at Lashon Hara? How can we get better at Kavana? Let's deal with those issues. So the first reason is that we can combat it. And then I think the second issue is more psychologically based, is that if you think you're the only one who's struggling with something, that's hard. You might think that you're like some weird deviant, or that you just have this crazy Yetzer Hara that's just killing you and that's just beating you up. And a person can become overwrought, with this and just completely despondent when we fail. And the idea that the Gemara is telling us is that, guess what? Everybody struggles and everybody fails. And there's comfort, right? There's misery loves company. There's comfort in knowing that other people are struggling. Sometimes when two people are struggling, you could put both things. I know you're probably struggling with Kavana. You're probably struggling with Lashon Hara. So you know what? Let's work together, right? And there's comfort in that. And you shouldn't be. It's chas v'sholom. The Gemara is chas v'sholom, not giving us a license to speak Lashon Hara or to think about Averos or any of that. But it's important to know that others struggle as well. And also that a person, you must realize, and you can't react like with that every slip up of Lashon Hara or every uninspired mincha is not this religious Armageddon. It's not this crazy failure. So I think those are the two real reasons why the Gemara feels the need to publicize this. Let's go weiter. Interestingly, the Maharal in his Chidushim an Agados quotes this Gemara, and the Maharal just says an interesting thing that I think is worthy of note. That a person, we usually highlight that there are really two different types of mitzvos and two different categories of mitzvos. We have mitzvos that are ben adam lechaver, between me and my friend, right? Paying a worker on time, hachnasas orchim, nichum avelim. Though there are mitzvos that are between me and my friend. And then there are mitzvos between me and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. blowing shofar and matzah and tefillin and wearing tzitzis, those are mitzvahs between me and God, right? When I put on tefillin, it doesn't make me closer to Moshe, right? What it does is makes me closer to God. When I make a shiva call, that doesn't make me necessarily closer to God, but it makes me closer and build a relationship between a person. Then there's a third level, which we don't think about very often, which is bin adam la'atzmo, right? Which has been adam la'atzmo, me and myself. So the Maharal writes, and he understands here her avera, right, as not just thinking about eating a cheeseburger, but really more in the world of sexuality, of immorality, of, let's say, lustful thoughts, as we've said before. He says it's interesting that all three, there is an area, a common avera in all three realms, in all three categories or worlds. Tefillah is bin adam lemakom. I'm speaking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Lashon hara is bin adam l'chavero. I'm speaking about somebody else. I'm speaking, did you see what she wore to the wedding? Whatever it was. And then my own thoughts, who I am, that is bin adam. Lastly, that is bin adam la'atzmo. And then he meant there is a two more points that I really want to make on this. He says, interestingly, Merl also says that at the very end of the Gemara, we quote Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda says that many people do gazel, stealing, and to a lesser extent, people are engaged in the avera of arayos, but everybody speaks lashon hara. Why is that? Why is that? The Maharal writes? The Maharal writes this beautifully. He says, like, theft, gazel, and arayos, sexual immorality, they come with a certain level, like a certain degree of degradation. It embarrasses the sinner, right? If you're at a dinner party, you're sitting next to a guy at shul, and the guy's, I cheated on my wife, I cheated on my husband, I looked at this on the internet. You look at that guy like, whoa, that's pretty degrading behavior, right? And the guy says, no, you know what? I stole $1,000 from my friend. I stole $1,000, $10,000 from my boss. I don't pay taxes. Whatever, right? Look at the person, like, what kind of person are you, right? But with lashon hara is different. The Maharal writes, the speaker, right? Often, when you speak about something, you're coming from a position of power. There's an air of superiority that you have, and you're talking about the misdeeds of others. Did you know that she did this? Do you know that he did that? Do you know that the way he's raising his kids? Do you know that he allows his kids to have this, or he got this for his kids, or whatever it is? We're almost like we're the arbiter of morality and parenting or religious, actions, whatever it is. They're very different. A person is not embarrassed to speak lashon hara because he feels that he's doing something for society when he speaks it. Whereas that's completely different when it comes to, as the Gemara says, gazel and miyut, which is such an important idea that the Maharal writes when we think about why we speak lashon hara and when we speak lashon hara. And he really answers as that is at the root of, I guess, the frequency of lashon hara. And then I want to just finish with one interesting idea. The Gemara in Yuma, and Daf Chav Tes Amud Aleph, says hirhure avera are kashu me avera. That thoughts of avera are kashu, are harder. They're worse than actually the avera itself. What in the world does that mean? Now, halachically, that this phrase of hirhure avera kashu me avera is not necessarily in the realm of culpability, right? Obviously, thinking about a cheeseburger is not as bad as eating a cheeseburger. Okay, right? So that's a Gemara in Kiddushin. And obviously, you can't hold a person liable for their thoughts of sin. However, so what does the Gemara say? What does the Gemara mean when it says that here Hure Avera are kashu me Avera? So the idea here is that thoughts of sin are. This is the Tosfos Yishanim. The Tosfos Yishanim says a beautiful idea. He talks about the smell of treif meat. Smelling treif meat is much worse than eating treif meat. He's not saying obviously halachically. What he means is that thoughts of sin are far more difficult to counteract. You can't fight the thought of sin. Why? Because they remain unfulfilled. You never get an answer. It's always like, what would that What would it be like to go here on Shabbos, or to watch this, or to see this, or to engage in this immoral behavior, or to steal that, to eat that, right? The sin is ever beckoning. The sin is always full of the delight, of the pleasure, of the splendor. But most probably, when you eat the cheeseburger, okay, you ate it, and it's probably not earth shattering. It's not life altering, and that's why Shiur Avera is kashu me'avera, because it never ends. You can't ever get it out of your mind. It's almost like halachically we would never say this, but you know what? If a person is consumed by the taste of a cheeseburger, just taste this cheeseburger. It's not awesome. It's not life altering. Get over it, and then you won't have these Shiur Avera all the time, right? But that's what that I think is an important idea, that we need to maybe come to the realization, if we would stop and think and say, whatever that Avera is that we pine for, we long for, you know what? It's probably not as awesome. If we would taste it, if we would get it, if we would engage in it, it's probably not as otherworldly as our mind is as our mind is allowing us to get to that place. We shouldn't get to that place. I thought this was I thought it's worth chewing over this Gemara of the mistakes of common man and the frequency of of certain averos of kavana and gezel and Shiur Avera and obviously lashon hara. I think is just something to think about. Misery loves company, I think, is important to know, whether that allows us to prepare proper precautions, or whether that helps us feel less despondent when we make a mistake, when we mess up, when we don't daven or live or hold ourselves up to the high level that we should aspire to and we should be trying to attain. The Yerushalmi is an unforgettable Yerushalmi of the Amoraim, that all of them struggled greatly with kavana. In that Gemara, that Rav Matisyahu Solomon, his interpretation, his understanding of that one word Rashi, niskaven. We should think about one of the kavanas that we have when we're davening is just in the effectiveness of tefillah, how HaKadosh Baruch Hu could do anything at any time, and finally this idea of the Shiur Avera and how that hopefully grounds us. We should ground us. To realize the grass isn't always greener, it's not always better, but something to chew on, something to think about. Have a fabulous week.